Today I'm going to tell you about the most incredible near-death experience I've ever heard. It's the story of a young woman named Sarah, who died briefly while hiking in South Korea. What she witnessed during those moments on the other side gave her a terrifying glimpse of World War III and changed her life forever. My name is Sarah, and I had an extraordinary near-death experience when I was 23 years old. At the time, I was a college student at NYU studying abroad for a semester in Seoul, South Korea. I had always been fascinated by Korean culture, so when the chance to study there came up, I jumped at it. Seoul was an amazing city, totally different from anything I was used to back in the US. I loved exploring the winding alleys, trying all the tasty street food, and practicing my terrible Korean with the locals. But my favorite part was weekend trips out to the countryside. The mountains surrounding Seoul were absolutely breathtaking. I joined a hiking club at my university so I could explore as much as possible. One sunny Saturday in October, my friends Jen, Tyler, and I set out early to hike Mount Dobongsan. It was a clear, crisp autumn morning, perfect weather for being outdoors. We took the train about an hour outside of Seoul and then started the steep climb up the mountain. All around us, the fall foliage was a dazzling canvas of golds, reds, and oranges. The pace was challenging, but I was too enchanted by the views to mind. After a few hours, we reached the summit and took a break to eat snacks and admire the panorama below. I'll never forget how peaceful it was up there above the tree line, with only the sound of the wind and the crunch of leaves under our boots. Once we were refueled, we began making our way back down the other side of the mountain. The trail was steeper here and narrowed as it switched back down through boulders and pines. "Let's be careful," Jen said, always the cautious one. The three of us picked our way slowly down the path, concentrating hard on our footing. But about halfway down, I got distracted trying to take a photo of a colorful bird fluttering across the ravine. My foot slipped on a patch of gravel, and before I knew it, I was skidding down the steep slope, crashing into rocks and branches. The last thing I remember is the panicked shouts of my friends and a lightning bolt of pain as the back of my head cracked against something hard. Then everything faded to black. The next thing I knew, I was floating above my body, watching as my friends scrambled down the mountainside towards my crumpled figure. It was the strangest sensation. I didn't feel connected to my physical form at all anymore. I didn't feel much of anything actually, except a sense of complete peace and tranquility. I watched calmly as Jen frantically dialed for emergency services while Tyler tried to stop the bleeding from my head. Some hikers who had been ahead of us on the trail heard the commotion and came running to help, but I already knew it was too late. My spirit was detaching rapidly from my earthly form. Before long, everything around me dissolved into a haze of brilliant white light. It was strangely comforting, like being swaddled in a soft blanket. My worries and fears melted away as I seemed to float higher and higher into the glow. After some time, the radiance cleared, and I found myself standing in a spectacular golden landscape. Lush green hills rolled gently towards a crystal blue horizon. Flowers in every color imaginable swayed in the sweet breezes. The sky was dazzlingly bright, as though the sun was shining from every direction at once. I had never seen anywhere so beautiful in my life. But even more incredible than the scenery was the being who stood smiling before me. A gentle-looking man with olive skin, piercing blue-green eyes, and a rust-colored beard. Some innate knowing told me this was Jesus. And yet he wasn't the Jesus of paintings and sculptures. He was far more vibrant, as though the light was shining from within him. Without speaking, Jesus conveyed kindly, "Welcome, Sarah. You have passed far too early from the life you were living. You are at a crossroads now. If you wish, you may stay here with me in this paradise, or you may return to your earthly body. There is still purpose for you there." My heart ached to remain in this place of complete peace and unconditional love. But my mind traveled back to my family and friends who would be devastated if I did not return. My parents, my little sister Rachel, Tyler, Jen. I thought of my hopes and dreams that would go unfulfilled if my life ended now. As wonderful as it felt here, I knew it was not my time. "I wish to return," I told Jesus. He nodded understandingly. Then his expression became serious. "There are events coming that you must know about, so you can live the remainder of your days to the fullest." Before I could ask what he meant, the splendid surroundings evaporated, and vivid visions began flashing before me like a movie screen. What I saw shook me to my core. First, I witnessed North and South Korea reunifying into one nation after decades of division. People were celebrating in the streets, as families long separated were finally reunited. The scene shifted, and I saw the new united Korea invading neighboring countries, first Japan, then China, Mongolia, and Russia. The rest of the world was stunned at this show of military force from a nation that had been dormant for so long. The Korean military moved swiftly from one victory to the next. Soon, they controlled much of East Asia. Other global powers, alarmed at Korea's rapid expansion, formed tenuous alliances to counter this new threat. But no one was prepared when the Koreans boldly invaded Australia next. The visions accelerated. Korea and its allies made aggressive moves against Europe and the Americas. Before long, the entire planet was engulfed in war. Horrifying weaponry was unleashed. Mushroom clouds bloomed over cities as people ran screaming through the streets. Much of humanity suffered and perished in the conflict. I fell to my knees before Jesus, weeping. Why show me this?" I cried. "How could this happen? Can't it be prevented?" Jesus' voice was solemn in my mind. The future is always in motion. But as of now, this path is the most probable for your world. I have shown you so you understand how precious life is. Share this knowledge with others when you return. Encourage them to appreciate each moment, work together towards peace, and spread compassion. Though I trembled with dread of the dark times ahead, I knew I must return to my body and fulfill the purpose Jesus spoke of. As much as I longed to stay in the warmth and light of the other side, I knew I still had a role to play on earth. The visions faded away. I felt myself accelerating through the white tunnel again, faster and faster, until I was back on the mountainside in Korea, gasping my first breath as Tyler gave me CPR. My recovery was long and difficult. I had to stay in Korea for months, going through surgeries and rehab. Jen and Tyler visited daily, filling me in on what I'd missed in class and bringing noodles and Korean dramas to help me pass the time. I was endlessly grateful for their support. When I was finally stable enough to return home, the doctors could hardly believe the progress I'd made given the extensive injuries I'd arrived with. "It's like you've got angels watching over you," one of the nurses remarked. I just smiled softly, thinking of the enlightened being who'd sent me back. My parents wept with relief when I surprised them by coming home for Christmas that year. It was the best present any of us could have imagined. My mom cooked up all my favorite foods, while my dad hugged me and said, "God must have big plans for you, sweetheart." Once I was back at NYU for spring semester, I changed my major from business to social work. My brush with death had crystallized my desire to help others and make a difference in the world. Though I never told anyone the full details, I often spoke about having a second chance at life during those years. My friends noticed I seemed calmer, more philosophical, since my accident in Korea. I became extremely active in causes like suicide prevention and homeless outreach. Taking care of my mental health was also something I focused on more after my NDE. I saw a therapist regularly to process my experience and deal with the dread of what I'd witnessed. Journaling and meditation became daily practices. After graduating, I got a job at a nonprofit for at-risk youth. My relationships deepened as I learned to appreciate little moments with loved ones, and I made a point to laugh and have fun when I could. Every day on earth was a gift I didn't take for granted. Still, not a day went by that I didn't think of what Jesus had shown me and wonder if the nightmare future was still inching closer. I scoured the news, looking for signs of rising tensions between North and South Korea. The first hopeful indicator came in 2000, when the leaders of both nations held a historic summit in Pyongyang. Maybe this will lead to reunification and peace, I prayed. But negotiations stalled in following years, and military aggression heated up again. I returned to Korea several times, partly to visit old favorite spots, and partly in hopes of detecting the political rumblings that might precede another attempt at reconciliation. In 2018, my heart leapt as Kim Jong-un crossed the border into South Korea for a meeting with President Moon Jae-in. It seemed reunification might finally occur through diplomacy rather than war. I crossed my fingers. This milestone would put both nations on a new path. Watching Ukraine invaded in 2022 was an urgent reminder that peace is always fragile. My chest tightens each time tensions flare up again on the Korean peninsula, but I try to stay optimistic, remembering what Jesus told me about the future being changeable. Perhaps through hope, hard work, and brotherhood, we can avert the dark reality I witnessed and create a brighter tomorrow. Now in my 40s, I'm no longer haunted by my NDE like I was in younger years. The wisdom and perspective it gave me are gifts I carry with gratitude. And when my time on earth does come to a close, I'll be ready to return to that beautiful realm of light. Until then, I endeavor daily to walk in the spirit of what Jesus showed me, living generously, loving unconditionally, and lighting the way for others. This is the purpose I've been given, and it's one I fully embrace. Sarah's vision of a coming world war has haunted her over the years. She doesn't know exactly when or how this conflict will arise, only that her experience felt like a genuine premonition. All she can do is live each day to the fullest, spreading compassion and hoping to make the world a little bit better place. Though the future remains uncertain, Sarah's story reminds us that life is fragile and precious. We must make the most of the time we're given and treat others with kindness, for we know not what tomorrow may bring.